Hey everyone, welcome to Judging for the Win. I'm Dave, and this is my daily ruling. Amy and Nick's Game 3 goes the full length of the round. On turn 5 of extra turns, Amy, who's at 3 life, ends her turn unable to eke out a win. Nick is tapped out and shows Amy a lightning bolt in his hand, saying, "I had you dead next turn. Would you concede to me?" Amy calls for a judge and asks if what Nick just did is allowed. How do you rule? Alright, so there's two potential issues that I can see with what just happened. Some people might be wondering whether it's legal for Nick to reveal the lightning bolt in his hand, and the answer to this is that he can. Players are responsible for making reasonable efforts to keep from revealing hidden information if they want to keep it hidden. But they are allowed to reveal hidden information that they legitimately have access to at any time unless there's some specific rule against it. So, for example, it would not be allowed to reveal what cards that you're taking in a booster draft. But in the case described in the original problem statement, there's no rule saying Nick cannot reveal this card. And that brings us to the second potential issue. Maybe some people are wondering about what I just said. After all, there certainly are some things that you are not allowed to say or offer at the end of a match when trying to get your opponent to concede to you. One hopefully obvious example is that you cannot threaten or intimidate your opponent to attempt to coerce them into conceding. Another example is that you cannot offer your opponent anything in an attempt to induce them to concede. In addition to money, this would also include things like cards, favors, or agreements to concede a future match to them if they give you this one now. In addition to aggressive behavior and bribery, the third major thing that tends to get people in trouble is improperly determining a winner, which, like those last two, is also a DQable infraction. The one that is potentially relevant to the case that we're considering would be this one. You are not allowed to use a random method or something that involves actions that are not legally part of the game in order to determine a game or match result. This includes things like offering to roll a die to determine who wins, and revealing the top cards of your library to predict who would have won if the game had continued. The difference between this and what Nick did is that it is legal for a player to look at cards in their hand. It is normally not legal for a player to look at cards in their library. There are lots of variations of this scenario where the application of this policy is less clear-cut. For example, if a player cracks a fetch land and shows what cards were on the top of their library in the search. Or if a player controls a Sphinx of Dwar Isle. Or if a player played a Ponder last turn so they know what the top card of their library is, there just isn't anything saying that they can look at it right now. For my reading of the policy, I would say that the first two of those are allowed, but the Ponder one technically isn't. Still, I would have a hard time saying that I would disqualify someone over what feels like such a technicality, so maybe I would just issue a looking at extra cards along with a stern warning. Such cases are ultimately up to the head judge's interpretation of the policy, but I think the one that was presented in the original problem statement, where the player just reveals a card that was in their hand, is clear-cut. This is a pretty canonical example of something players are allowed to do, and as long as Nick isn't trying to put pressure on his opponent to concede, I wouldn't have a problem with it. Nor would I have a problem if Amy agreed to Nick's request, so long as she didn't imply that she was expecting some sort of benefit to come her way as a result. Usually now is where I would talk about how the ruling would differ depending on the rule's enforcement level. But that's not applicable since the original scenario is allowed at any rel. The policy surrounding the illegal case where players look at cards that they weren't allowed by the game to see is also largely the same at regular and competitive rules enforcement level, with the caveat that players who commit these infractions without knowing they're against the rules just get a stern talking to at regular, but in a competitive environment it's a match loss. In either case, if you know it's against the rules, the penalty for proposing or agreeing to improperly determine a winner is disqualification. This is a tough topic because questions like these involve some amount of investigation and interpretation from the judge, and some very high stakes for the players. Amy did the right thing here, and I recommend that you follow her example. If there's ever a question about what you're legally allowed to say or offer in a case like this, don't guess. Call for a judge. And that's all I have for you today. How did you do? Join me again next time for another daily ruling. Until then, I hope you have a great day.